Hey, what's going on? It's Chris, Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to do a live discussion on Haemonculus Covens, and we're going to dig into them a little bit, kind of talk about what's good, what's not good, combos that I like, and how I would probably use them. We've touched on the Cabals, we've touched on the witch cults, so I wanted to take some time to make sure I touched on the Covens as well. And tomorrow, it's looking like I should be playing Tyranids for our competitive league, so we'll have a recap on that. He's a very, very exceptional Tyranids player. We talked about it last week. Somebody was like, "Oh, very good." Yeah, okay, bro, calm down. He's good. Like, what do you want me to say? So it's one of those where he's a good, solid player. It'll be a good, close game. And we'll see how that goes. We'll do a recap on that. And then I wasn't supposed to be streaming this week. I was supposed to be working Adepticon, but it's looking like that may not be happening. Uh, Not really sure what's going on there. It might just be a communication issue, honestly. I've reached out to Games Workshop to see what happened there because I was on the schedule. I was supposed to be a Kill Team TO, and for whatever reason, I've not been contacted about setting up a hotel or anything like that. And so at this point, it's just I'm assuming I'm not going to be working it because at this point we're this close to the event. It is this week, and the last time this happened, I ended up not working an event. So we're just going to operate under that assumption that we're not working the event, which is unfortunate because had I known, I would have just gone and played at the event, right? I would have probably done the singles, taken my boys or even my Drukari, try to get a little more practice in, get them reps in, boost those ITC rankings a little bit. But it is what it is. We'll see. It's not the end of the world. And I think I'm just done talking about this for now. As usual, big shout out to Military Gaming Command. You can see their logo. Their link will be in the description. I do have a giveaway. That link will be in the description as well. So make sure you're sharing this. Make sure you're subscribing if you're not subscribed. It's a gorgeous Umbral 6 model. It was commission painted by Midwest Minis. Excuse me. So again, just really really cool model. He did exceptional work on it. I'm really happy and proud to be able to give that away. So make sure you are clicking like and subscribe on that specific video. If you like the content, obviously like and subscribe. I'm done with my spiel. Let's dig in. We're going to go to the no-no site that I definitely don't go to. That is not a thing I do. We need to boop, boop, boop. No, sorry, I am just being kind of stupid. There we go. Now we've got it. We got there from here. Friend, give me a second to look at one thing. Bop, 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 bop. That's not me. That's not me. I need me. That dude's got my name. Curses. It ain't me. All right. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I had my life in order before we started this. Sometimes we get our life in order. We can do it this way, though, and I know it'll work. Haha, nerd. Boop. Yes, 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 yes. I just wanted to push this link out. I don't mean to have this much dead space. I apologize. Boop. Oh. Boop. Create this post. Create it good. And sorry, like this doesn't. I didn't mean for this to be such an ad hoc stream. Like I said, I just wasn't expecting to be streaming this week. I expected to be out of town, so I apologize. All right, bam. So I wanted to make sure I capitalized on my extra time and at least do some really relevant content. And as we all know, I prefer the live stream kind of interaction. So just because if I get people in here, I like having yep, maybe. No, that's not the right link. What a silly goose I am. Let's try that again. Share, copy. There we go. It was bad. Come discuss Haemonculus Covens. All right. There we go. Now we're doing it. There we go. So, again, apologies. Everything was kind of last minute ad hoc. So, that's probably people telling me my link is bad. Yep, perfect. But now it's not. Okay, so as we know, the Drukhari Codex is basically comprised of 3 different armies in one. You have a few different ways you can run them, right? You can run your Cabal. You know what? Boop, boop, boop. There we go. My logos weren't up. You can run the Cabals, you can run the Witch Cults, and you can run the Covens. You can bring 1, 2, or 3 of them, but you can't bring 2 different sub-factions for the same army, if that makes sense. So, like, if you bring 2 Witch Cult detachments, which I don't even know if you can do now in the Arcs of Omen, I haven't looked at how that interacts. You probably could. I'd have to look. But if you bring 2 Cabal, I think we started at Cult and now we're on Cabal. If you bring 2 Cabal detachments, right, they'd have to be Poison Tongue or Blackheart or whatever. You couldn't bring 1 of Poison Tongue and 1 of Blackheart. They have to be the same. Outside of that, you could bring like 1 Haemonculus Coven, like I said, and 1 Witch Cult. So we've already talked about everything except for the Coven, so that's where we're going to dig in. Let's actually start by looking at some data sheets, okay? That's not what I needed, guys. Drukhari, hit you with that Wario. And this is what you guys all signed up for. Sorry for that. All right, so the Haemonculus Covens. We wanted to start at some data sheets. So we're going to pull up the old Haemonculus. Boop. We're not going to worry about the named guys so much. We're going to pull up some racks. Boop. And we're going to pull up some grotesques. Boop. And then we're going to pull up some Chronos. I love these things. The Chronos and the Talos are so good. All right. So we're going to start with the racks or the Haemonculus. We'll just go right in this order. So the Haemonculus, right, is your HQ slot. He moves 7 inches. That is one thing I do like about the elves, is that they have the good movement. They are a little pokey, so to say. Or not pokey, squishy. There we go. That's the word I wanted. But they do move fast. 7 inches. Weapon skill 2 up. Ballistic skill 2 up. Toughness 4. He has 6 wounds. Like, he's a chunky boy. 4 attacks. And then he comes equipped with a Stinger pistol and a Haemonculus tools and an Ichor injector and scissor hands, right? And the scissor hands are poison 4, but he gets 2 additional attacks. The Ichor injector, you get 1 attack and only 1 attack, and if it hits, you just do a mortal wound. And then the Haemonculus tools are just poison 2 plus no rend. And then the Stinger pistol is obviously just poison 2 plus no rend. And we just have Blade Artist, which is just wound rolls of 6 or an additional pip of AP. That's effectively everything in the Codex. Insensible to Pain, he's got a 5-up Feel No Pain, and then he gets access to the Power from Pain. Too easy. Now, he does add 1 to the toughness of any Coven core units, which is really only going to be your Rax and your Grotesques, because the Talos and the Chronos lost the core keyword in a data slate, which is weird. I don't disagree that they needed to lose some of the things that they got access to for core. And we'll dig into that in a little bit, because the Chronos had some silly abilities and some silly interactions, but losing access to the +1 to toughness really is just kind of like they probably didn't need to lose access to that. They probably could have kept that. And then Fleshcraft, at the end of your movement phase, select 1 Haemonculus Coven monster or grotesque unit from your army, and then they heal D3 wounds. So he heals he's basically like a tech marine, like he's going to heal your multi-wound models. There is a warlord trait that you can give him to have him replenish racks, but we'll kind of dig into that in a little bit also, because we're going to talk about different ways you could build them. And then Alchemical Maestro, once per battle, when he dies on a 2-up, he comes back with D3 mortal wounds, or not mortal wounds, just D3 wounds remaining. And that's if you upgrade him, but if you upgrade him, you get to take the other boys, the Haemonculus. And the Haemonculus, if I remember correctly, they just have a bonus leadership, but they add 1 to their invulnerable save. So they start off with a 5-up, 5-up, and then when they hit the turn 4 of your Power from Pain, they actually go to a 4-up, 5-up. So they can be pretty chunky, but you're only limited to 10 in the unit, so they're probably going to evaporate as soon as somebody dedicates anything really to them. You can give him blah, 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 blah. All right, so the Ampule, roll a d6 on a 2-up. A unit suffers d3 mortal wounds and shuts off auras. Okay. And then the Twisted Reanimator, or Twisted Animator. This is what I was talking about. You could pick a rack unit within 3 inches, and then d3 destroyed models are added back to the unit. And they can be set up within engagement range of enemy units that are already within engagement range of that unit. So again, could be very good depending on your build. Racks, right? So they're T4, 1 wound. They have a 5-up, feel no pain. They all have rack blades, which are just poison 4, and they're -1 AP. So racks are actually probably my favorite troop choice in this codex. I do like witches a lot. The Cabalites are starting to grow on me a little bit as I've learned how to use them a bit better, and they're a bit cheaper, right? But racks have always just been my favorite because they're durable. They put out a decent amount of attacks, and they just kind of, in my brain, they kind of feel the way orcs should feel, even though orcs don't feel this way, right? They're like surprisingly resilient, even though they're just a t-shirt save unit. So the rack blades, like I said, they're poison 4, so they always, let's look at poison real quick, just so we can give everybody a refresher. Blah, 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 blah. They automatically wound all things that aren't vehicles or Titanics on an unmodified wound roll of 4, or whatever the poison value is. So it doesn't, and then there's a strat so that they can affect vehicles but not Titanic. So, Hex Rifle, you can give one a Hex Rifle, which is just a sniper rifle. It is a heavy 1, which means they're going to be hitting on 4s most of the game, or you're going to be advancing them as well. So it's one of those where maybe you take it. It's only 5 points. It's not bad. It is strength 6, so you're wounding most things on 3s that you're going to be shooting at with it. And it is -2 for 2 damage, so it could be pretty spicy to have that in there. The liquefier guns are worth their points. They're just -2 flamers. And, those things are assault, so you can keep advancing and keep shooting. And then when you hit turn 2 and you get advance and charge, they become pretty mobile. And in a unit of 10, you can get 2 liquefiers because you can put 1 on the sergeant and then 1 on one of your lads. If I remember correctly, you might have to just take 2 on the lads, but you get 2 for 10. is how yep, see right down here. Boop. And then the Asa Factor, that's an interesting gun. I have not played with it much, but it is a 2 damage poison weapon. So that one also might be worth because you can just keep shooting it. I've not really played with it. I've only used the liquefiers because those just fit the way I want my racks to kind of handle a lot better. You know, they're going to be advancing, and I don't want to have to roll hit rolls. And -2 AP means I'm forcing Marines to a 5-up save, 4-up save if they're in cover, and I'm going to average with 2 of them in the squad 7 automatic hits, which means I'm going to average 3.5 wounds, which means you know, unless they're in cover, I'm going to kill a Marine every time they shoot, which isn't a bad thing, right? And then the sergeant can get a whole bunch of stuff, right? Which is the Akathist. And then he can replace his rack blades with any of this. So let's look at it. I like the electro-corrosive whip because it doubles his attacks and it's -2 rend. Like, he goes from 3 attacks to 6 attacks. He's very good then, right? And that is, to me, worth the 5 points. The Flesh Gauntlet is okay. It's just there's no AP, and I'd rather have the AP. The Mind Phase Gauntlet is pretty solid because it's 2 damage. So again, I have no complaints there. I just would rather have double the hits. But we'll kind of dig into why when we start looking at the actual factions and how I tend to play them, right? Poison Weapon, Scissor Hands, we've already talked about. Venom Blades. So Venom Blades are pretty good because they're -1 AP, but they're poison too. So unless you're a vehicle, you're getting wounded on 2s, right? So that's also pretty good. Their favorite, yep, and that's 2 points. Blah, 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 blah. We don't need to worry about any of that. Okay. So here's Haemoxites. Yep. Improve this unit's saves characteristics and invulnerable save by 1 to a maximum of 4. And then add 1 to the leadership. And then once per phase, they reduce the damage of a saving throw by 0. So again, and I always forget about this last one, but they're actually that's a pretty solid unit to have. Do you need it? No, not at all. But is it going to be wasted points if you take it? No. Like, it's still pretty good, and it still only puts them at 11 points a model. You know, so again, that's not terrible. They're not as cheap that way, but they have a little bit of added durability, and the extra leadership will help them out a little bit too. The grotesques are amazing. I've just started using those with this league list, and man, these things are silly good. I have no complaints, but again, I'm sure part of that is kind of how I'm running them. Of course, they're going to get insensible to pain, blade artists, power from pain. So they come with a monstrous cleaver and a flesh gauntlet. And the monstrous cleaver, right, gives you an additional attack. So it's kind of like a lightning claw. So they have 4 attacks base. This will put them at 5. Now you can replace their cleaver with a liquefier, at which point they're 5 points more expensive, but they get to shoot as well as melee. But then you're only using this, which is strength 6, 0 AP, 1 damage, but your wound rolls of 6 do immortal in addition to. And that's not bad, right? Because you're still getting 4 attacks. There's ways for you to kind of lean into that. There's a stratagem that lets them reroll their wound rolls. It's 2 command points for grotesques, 1 command point for, I think, for rack units with 10 or less models. Which, let's see if we can find it. Torturer's Craft. Yep, that's exactly how it interacts. It's this one right here. So, these aren't bad, but you'd have to really lean into it. Like, you would probably want to build your Haemonculus Coven around maximizing your mortal wounds, because this is just like ridiculously good. 5 attacks, strength 5, neg 2, 2 damage. They're strength 6 with the way that I play them. And again, it's just so good, right? It is ridiculously good. Boop. I just want to see some. There we go. So it's definitely worth it to me, right? They're T5. They are core, so if you keep them by the homunculus, they're going to be T6. 4 wounds, 6 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain. They are durable. And again, like if we look back at my last league game, I played Space Wolves, and homeboy had a redemptor on the table. He had some devastators. Like he had some shooting, and they soaked his whole shooting phase, and I still had models left over. And again, like part of that is dice, and I understand that, but it is a dice game. So on average though, they're going to take a lot more punishment than your opponent is going to be prepared to want to commit to them. So it's one of those where they'll most armies are going to have to overcommit to them because they're surprisingly durable. There's a few armies that sure, like they're just gonna make you pick them up, like Tau and Votan. But when you've just got like infinite 3 and 4 damage guns, like that just is the way it is. Chronos. Now we're gonna dig into the Chronos, and we're gonna talk about why they lost the core word, right? And some of the silly shit that you can do because of that, or could have. And they are 75 points a model. They're weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3. So they're like one of the only things that's not weapon skill 3 in the codex. And then the Talos is one of the only things that's not weapon skill 4 or ballistic skill 3 in the codex. And we'll kind of dig into like some of the issues that this army does have, but we'll get there. They're T6, 7 wounds, 3 up save, so they're also one of the few things that actually has an armor save. They do fly, they move 8 inches, they are monsters. They come equipped with the Spirit Siphon and Spirit Leech Tentacles. The Spirit Siphon is just a flamer. It's D6, auto hits, 12 inches. And then your wound rolls of 6 go to damage 2. And then the Spirit Leech Tentacles are strength 5, neg 1, 1 damage. Your wound rolls of 6 are damage 2. And then they do have Blade Artists, right? Okay, so let's look at this Reservoir of Pain. First, each time a model in this unit destroys an enemy model with its Spirit Leech Tentacles, you can select this unit or one other Drukhari core unit within 6 inches of this unit. After this unit has fought, one model in the selected unit regains 1 lost wound. If no models in that unit have lost any wound, but that unit is not at its starting strength, you can instead return 1 destroyed model to that unit with 1 wound remaining. This model can be set up in engagement range, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so when Talos and Kronos were core, you could just use your Kronos to keep your Talos fully healed and keep putting them back on the table, right? Uh, Interestingly, it does say when this unit or another core unit within 6 inches has fought. Time a model in this unit destroys an enemy model with a right. I was just rereading that because I didn't say it right, but we know what I meant. Basically, though, what that means is like these can be a little harder to shift if you can get them into the right targets. If somebody's got just like regular intercessors that are probably not going to kill these super fast, you can sit there and you can just kind of grind them down, kill models, and then revive your Chronos or other nearby units. And a good example of that was I was playing a Votan player, and he had his just regular boys, and he jumped his Terminators to shoot my Hellions off the table. He only killed like 3 or 4 of my Hellions, and it was a 10-man unit. So my Hellions advanced to the middle of the board to just because once he jumped his Terminators, I was like, all right, cool, that's it. They're gonna just sit there. So I advanced them, got my Kronos up to the middle of the board. Both of them charged into a unit of his troops, and then I just fought with my Kronos first. And then I was just reviving Hellions as my Kronos killed his models, and then my Hellions got to play cleanup. And I ended up getting like 2 or 3 of my Hellions back because I just killed so many of his troops. So it's one of those where if you position it well, you can do some neat things with that. But that is one of the main interactions on why they lost core, especially the Talos, right? And then also there's a couple strats that they have access to that they no longer do because of that. Like there's one that lets you ignore Lookout Sir, the Talos being able to just throw heat guns at something and ignoring your screening rules, stuff like that, you know, got a little silly. They do have a really cool strat. I'm trying to see, is it this one? Nope. Pain Siphon. When they kill when a unit from your army within 6 inches of this unit destroys an enemy unit with a melee or ranged attack for 1 command point, uh, they just get to be at turn 5 for power from Pain. So again, like Chronos are very good, but they're a utility unit. They're not a damage dealing unit, as you can tell. And they can really do a lot of work if you position them well. They're not easy to use though because they don't get the bonus toughness, and that does make a difference. Um, and they don't have access to lightning fast reactions because you can't target homunculus units with it, so they don't get the -1 to hit or anything like that. Like they're kind of just core datasheet rules. They don't get a lot of extras, no frills, but they do have a lot of utility to kind of help make your army better. For 5 points, you get a 6-inch reroll wound rolls of one aura that affects core and characters. So again, like that's worth it to me because that affects everything. That's not just locked to your homunculus coven or your witch cult like your succubus would be. Sounds good, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in. I just it's a little wordy to get started with. Just a heads up because I wasn't expecting to be streaming this week. I thought I was going to be working a major uh, convention, and just doesn't look like that's going to be panning out. So I figured I'd get this in. Hell yeah, man. Racks are awesome, and we're gonna dig into like I said, some different builds here as soon as I get through some of these data sheets. And actually, we're on the last one now. So Talos are also really good. Again, they're ballistic skill 4, and this is inherently one of the biggest weaknesses that this army has. If you run into some of these grotesques are core. And if I had to pick between grotesques and Chronos, I would definitely take the grotesques every time. But if I'm running mono homunculus, I'm taking both, right? Because the Chronos can help keep a lot of things on the table that shouldn't be on the table. I don't know that I take more than a single unit of Chronos. Talos just do more work, and they fill a very similar role. And the grotesques also do more work and also provide a similar role. The Chronos just kind of fit solely in that utility role, and they're very good in that role, but I think you need to just have Homunculus to justify bringing a Chronos. Like, if you're bringing a real space raid, they're competing with too many other things that just do better damage output. Let's see, the Talos, like I said, and this is inherently my experience been one of the biggest weaknesses of this army, is if you hit any of the late edition codexes, that have just a lot of T8 or T9, like some Chaos Space Marine builds, some Votan builds, right? That's where this army is gonna struggle to do a lot of damage unless you bring like one of their only strength 9 guns, which is on a jet, right? The haywire blasters are solid, but the issue we run into is that this is ballistic skill 4. Each Talos gets 2 haywires, so they get 2 D3 shots. So if you have a unit of 3 Talos, you're averaging 4 shots per Talos times 3 is 12 shots, which means you're averaging 6 hits, which means you're averaging 3 wounds, right? So you're doing on average 3 wounds to a Land Raider with a 2-up save, which means it's going to fail 2 of those saves on average. So you might do 2d3 damage on average with 300 points worth of models. And then the melee doesn't do a lot more to them. And that's been my experience. So if somebody out there has experience into these things that has kind of cracked the code or figured out a way to make it better, I'd love to hear it. I know the Scourges do all right also, but again, it's 4D3 shots, but they are core. If you're running a space raid, they can reroll hit rolls of 1. Or if you've got like the Chronos to give you reroll wound rolls of 1. Yeah, I mean that checks out. Like I said, my main army is orcs. Drukhari is like my second love, and I run a lot of Koptas. So it's one of those where it's all or nothing, man, because they get 2D3 shots each also. And it's either like with 5 Koptas, I'm either getting 10 shots or I'm getting like 30 shots, but I don't really hit a lot in between. And so like that's super fair. But they've got the option to take the Heat Lance, which is a single shot. So again, you're only getting 2 shots per guy, so 6 shots, which again just turns into 3. But then you're wounding T9 stuff on 5s, which again becomes the issue. So I tend to just give them the Haywire Blaster. I don't really care about the fact that it's not going to work on infantry because my Talos are just gonna they're melee centric when I play them, right? They come equipped with 2 splinter cannons and 2 macro scalpels. The splinter cannons are okay, but again, we're looking at 4s and 4s. So I'd rather just give them the haywire and have something that can interact with vehicles because vehicle heavy armies tend to kind of be the crux of this army, like the kind of kryptonite. Unless you take like a lot of high strength stuff, which you can. Let's see. Macro scalpels are, and these to me are the best weapon you can put on them. Each time a bearer fights, if it has 2 macro scalpels, it makes 1 additional attack with this weapon, so they get 6 attacks with 2 macro scalpels. Uh, you could make an argument for like 1 Ichor injector, 1 macro scalpel, or even like 1 gauntlet and 1 macro scalpel, because the gauntlet is +2, -3, 3 damage. So the gauntlet would make you fight at strength 8. There are ways to get that to 9. So again, like the gauntlet's not bad. I just personally think the scalpel is the best way because it's cheap. A strong argument could be made for the Ichor injector just because if it hits, you just do a D3 mortals and then you're done. So, and you're hitting on 3s in the fight phase. So there's, like I said, a very strong argument for the Ichor injector as well. They do have Blade Artists and Insensible to Pain, Power from Pain, blah, 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 blah. So again, like these are very good. They're basically just a Chronos that is DPS as opposed to support. So that's kind of a cool thing there. They are kind of spicy at 100 points. Like that is not cheap for them, but I don't think they're overpointed. I think if they hover between 95 and 105 points, they're worth their points. Especially like if the upgrades stay priced where they are. The liquefiers being 15 points each is a little silly, but I guess I get it because it's a twin liquefier. I you know, it just they could probably be 10. But again, I couldn't tell you what people are running competitively with Drukhari. I can only tell you what I run competitively, and I'm starting to have good success with it as I understand that the issue I was having had less to do with the army and more to do with like you just don't take the faction based secondaries because they really suck. You have to play for the generic secondaries. Right. That's also fair. You know, they're expensive because they get put into a lot of lists, not because the data sheet is amazing or not amazing, but because they are just a staple, and people are going to take them even at 100 points. That's fair. So let's dig into boop. Let's start with oh, that's the actual homunculus. So let's go with the Covens. So we're going to start with the base Covens, right? And then we're going to talk about the custom Covens, and we'll kind of go over like different ways you could do things. So Butchers of Flesh, each time a model with this obsession makes attack with a melee weapon, excluding relics, improve the AP by 1, and then they can shoot and action. The shoot and action is largely irrelevant in the homunculus Covens. There's not like any army specific actions that I can think of off the top of my head. There are a handful of maybe like secondaries or the tertiary primary points, like data scry salvage. But most of the time, these guys don't have the guns. There's not a lot of reason for you to need to shoot with them while they're doing an action, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like, I'm not going to sweat whether or not I can throw 2d6 auto hits with my liquefiers, for example, because I decided to do RBD. Um, sure. But the extra pip of AP is really good because that gets your rack weapons to neg 2. And man, like that can get wild. And this is one of those where this faction does get played competitively a lot, especially during the Armor of Contempt days when everything was reduced by a pip. This putting it back meant that you were just playing your actual codex now instead of so again, like this one does get played competitively a lot because of the damage potential. The Warlord trait, Duty Eternal. You just subtract one from the damage characteristic of an attack. It's okay. Again, I don't know that you need that. And then the Relic is the Flensing Blade. It's D3 damage, Strength User, neg 2, but it's Poison 2. And then it has a total of 3 damage against characters. So again, not terrible. I don't know that you need it on your Homunculus. Like, they're not necessarily there to be a beat stick. Like, they tend to be, again, a more utility unit, providing that bonus toughness to your racks and that bonus toughness to your grotesques. So your command points might be better spent elsewhere, especially if you're running like a space raid. You're going to want, your succubus with the triptych whip and your precise blows, or like your Archon maybe with the Jin blade, or just some kind of interaction like that. There's just better options for your command points now that we're limited to 6 at the start of the game. And then their strat is the most inventive demise. I will say I love the names of the Drukhari strats. Like, they have some of the most ridiculous, like over the top angsty names for all of their stratagems, like a most inventive demise. And then it just lets you, when you consolidate use a stratagem after a unit consolidates. Select one enemy character model, excluding vehicle or monsters, within engagement range of this unit, and then on a 2/2/5, they take a D3 mortals. On a 6, they take a D3 plus 3 mortals. So it's basically like if you consolidate into a character, or if you were fighting a character and consolidate and are still in engagement range, if they're almost dead, you could try to do some chip damage to get them killed or whatever. So again, it's not a terrible strat. It's very very specific, but it is a good. If the situation arises that you would need it, it is a good tool in the toolbox. Dark Creed, Distillers of Fear. So this one, before we dig into it, this one's actually pretty solid if you layer it with some different things. They have a 6-inch aura of -1 leadership, -1 combat attrition tests. And then if you make an attack, when they make an attack, if their leadership is higher than their target's leadership, you can add 1 to the hit roll in the fight phase, obviously. So again, like this isn't terrible. You don't necessarily need it because you're going to be adding 1 to hit roll starting turn 3 anyway. But it's not bad, and it's going to consistently getting your racks hitting on 2s, getting your grotesques hitting on 2s, getting your chronos hitting on 3s, stuff like that. So it's not bad. It's just not amazing. You're going to have better, like this is going to interact better into Xenos armies than it will like Marines, because Marines just ignore combat attrition tests. And when you consider the fact that about 50% of the game to 60% of the game is just playing power armor, uh, you know, half your games are basically going to be unaffected by most of this stuff. It is funny to watch Marine players fail leadership checks, though, because you're debuffing their leadership. Like if you have a Venom that is in this obsession, and you give it the Grizzly trophies, it does have a 3-inch minus, or it does have a -3 leadership aura. So again, like you can take those Marines from leadership 9 down to leadership 6, and now it's a very failable leadership. And man, like I have watched some Marine players get salty over losing models to leadership, and I'm just like, yeah, welcome to the rest of the game, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. The Warlord trait, Fear Incarnate. At the end of your movement phase, you can select one enemy unit within 9 inches of this Warlord, roll 3d6. If it's greater than his leadership, he can't perform actions and loses OBSEC. So again, not bad. You can shut off OBSEC for a unit and you can deny it actions. Situational, but not bad. You know, you just it's one of those where that is one thing about Drukhari is they have a lot of tools in their toolbox, kind of like Gene Stealer Cult, but a lot of their tools are like job specific. And that is going to be one of the things that makes them a little bit harder of an army to use is that you have to understand what interactions you need and when you need them. Yeah. Interestingly, so I went to a tournament and I played an orc player, and like I said, I know orcs, so I know how that interaction's gonna go. And I did play an orc player round two at a tournament, and I wasn't even running this. I was running custom Coven, but I had Poison Tongue, and it was Grizzly Trophies, Poison Tongue, and he was picking up fistfuls of models just to combat attrition. And unfortunately for him, because I am an orc player first, I knew his book better than he did. And so, like, when he was like, well, this is how this works, and I'm like, no, it's not, buddy. And, like, we had to look a few things up, and he was just like, oh, shit. And I'm like, yeah, no, like, I basically go to bed every night reading this stupid book. Like, but yeah, no, it is going to be brutal. If he's got Gretchen, they're going to be running on like fives, right? If you can tag Gretchen with a Poison Tongue unit and have Grizzly trophies and everything else layered, um, you can get Gretchen running on, I think it's like fives after you account for all the modifiers and stuff. And again, that's the thing is like these types of interactions are very good into certain armies, but then you play against regular Marines and you're just like, yeah, all right, dude, cool. Let's see. Their relic, the Stinger pistol. It's neg 3 that ignores invulns, but it is 3 shots. Again, I don't know. It's not terrible. It's not bad, but it's not really good. It is pistol 2 or poison 2, so there is that. So you're just hitting and wounding on 2s. But again, I feel like there's better uses of your command points. An esoteric kill delivered from afar. Again, a little extra and over the top here. They basically you can pick a core or character model and they can ignore lookout, sure. So this is another one of those where this is arguably a big part of why the Talos and the Chronos lost the core tag. And again, it sucks because there's certain interactions that like they lost access to that really weren't game breaking. Like there's no reason they can't benefit from the Homunculus's +1 toughness aura, but I get why they stripped the core tag away. And again, it's okay. You're not taking, generally speaking, you're not taking homunculus units for their shooting, right? So it's one of those where it's okay. Like if you've got some liquefiers maybe or something, it could get a little silly. Prophets of Flesh, and this one is so all the named ones, and I've done research on the stats and stuff, right? The named ones get played a lot more than the custom ones. But to me, the custom ones are where the real like damage output and the silliness exists. Connoisseurs of Pain. At the start of your command phase, each character, grotesque, or monster unit with this obsession regains 1 lost wound. And then they've got basically transhuman physiology, but it's ramshackle. And what I mean by that is each time it's snake bites. Each time an attack is made against a unit with this obsession, unless that attack has a strength characteristic of 8 or more, an unmodified wound roll of 1 to 3 on that attack always fails, blah, 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 blah. The healing is nice. This secondary piece right here, kind of shit. When most of the stuff that you're going to be playing is toughness 5 after buffing or toughness 6 after buffing, that means it's only going to affect like strength 6 and strength 7 weapons. And again, it's the same issue I have with snake bites in the Orc Codex because they have the same interaction. uh, it's just kind of shit, right? Like, cool, other people's poison abilities also don't work, but those interactions are so limited, and so many of them are just wounding on 4s anyway, and not 2s or 3s. Um, like, I guess if you played against Poison Tongue, you negate their Poison Tongue ability, or if you play against the Succubus with the Triptych Whip, you just make her whip a lot less efficient. But it's so situational, and it's such just a worthless ability in so many ways when you're T5 and higher in most of your army. Like, if they were T3, this would be awesome and amazing. T4, but once we start getting above T4 into T5, T6 range, you might as well almost not even have it. I'm sure there's people out there who are like, nah, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and that's fine. I just don't. I don't think it's worth, when compared to what you get from the other ones. I don't think this is worth. And then Warlord trait, +1 toughness, +1 movement, +1 attack. So again, it's okay. I guess you could probably kit your boy out to be some kind of beat stick, but that's not really his role. The Vexator mask is pretty solid. Anything that can deny Overwatch is worth, because then you can send him in first. And then it does give you a fight last mechanic also. So this right here is actually a pretty solid relic. It basically turns him into a Howling Banshee. It's not exact, but it's a good analog. Sins writ large. Use this stratagem at the start of your fight phase. Select one Prophets of Flesh infantry from your army that has blah, 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 blah. It lets you reroll the hit roll as long as they're within 6 inches of a homunculus unit. So again, not bad. Not like amazing, but not bad. But now we're going to dig into where I think like the real power for homunculus is, right? And we're going to start with what I am running right now for my league. And that is, so it depends on how it's worded. Because we had this real big discussion when the Drukhari Codex first came out. Excuse me. The reason, so normally your offensive abilities would override defensive abilities, is how the core rules are written, right? But because transhuman, and let's just pull it up real quick. Because if I can show you transhuman. This little clause right here is what makes the defensive ability override the offensive ability. So core rules interactions, offense overrides defense, but because of this clause right here that says irrespective of any abilities that the weapon or the model making the attack may have, that's what causes the defensive ability to trump it. And it's interesting because if you look at poison, poison also has very generalized all-consuming language, because poison just says always wounds, right? But it doesn't say irrespective, and that's the issue. Let me see if I can find a poison weapon here. An unmodified wound roll of this value is always successful. So again, I love Warhammer. I actually love Games Workshop. I love working for them. They write some of the shittiest rules ever. Because here we have a very this will always work wording. So like all the transhuman type abilities do have that tag, which is why it doesn't make sense to have the core rules written the way they are. Uh, it's just like, sure, man. Why did you write the rules this way, but then have to rewrite your interactions this other way to make sure that they override your core rule interactions? No, it's and you're fine on the sidetrack, because like you're probably not the only person that has that question, so I'm glad you asked it. It's just one of those where it's like such a dumb interaction, and it's really just because, again, love the company, love the game, not the best when it comes to writing consistent rules. Because again, we have poison that says this is always successful, but then we have this that says irrespective of other abilities. So which one actually works? Does the one that's always successful work, or the one that says we ignore other abilities works? Um, and it's one of those where I've talked to Games Workshop judges on it, and we've had the discussion, and it is because of this irrespective of other abilities that causes the defensive ability to actually override the offensive ability. And that's why, like I said, like this Homunculus Coven is very matchup specific, but it's generally like this is not very good when you have T5 and better models. So we're gonna start with what I'm actually. Let's start with this one, Artists of the Flesh, all consuming. I love this one. It's very good, especially with where the game is right now. Each time an attack is allocated to a model with this obsession, excluding vehicle models, unless that attack has a strength characteristic of 8 or more, subtract 1 from the damage of that attack. Um, so it's Ramshackle, for those of you that know the Orc Codex. And Ramshackle is either really good or it's really bad. There's no in between, right? It's super matchup specific. It's, excuse me, really good into Chaos, for example, because a lot of Chaos players are just bringing a lot of Possessed, and they have a lot of like Strength 5 and Strength 6 2 damage attacks. It's good into certain Custodes builds because certain Custodes builds have, a lot of Strength 6 and Strength 7 2 damage attacks. Certain Custodes builds just run a lot of Strength 8, like it just depends on how that player is playing. But then Ramshackle, might as well not even have it into some Votan builds, might as well not even have it into most Tau builds, might as well not even have it into like certain Iron Hands or Space Marine builds. Like it's all or nothing. It's either really, really good or it's really, really bad. Um, but when you can put it on your 1 wound infantry and they have a Feel No Pain and an Invuln save, it becomes really, really good, right? Like if you're hitting me with Possessed and you get 10 wounds on me and I fail 5 of those saves, I now have 5 Feel No Pains I have to roll. Those Possessed, like I'm doubling my survivability against 2 damage attacks as long as they're Strength 7 or weaker. So when you do this, the Artists of Flesh, you're going to be running probably a lot more racks than you normally would, um, just to kind of capitalize on their durability that does increase. And then it does help make your what you call it, your grotesques and everything else a bit more survivable when you start running into like autocannons and heavy bolters and whirlwinds and things of that nature. Guard have, yeah, it is. It is a really, really good one. Let's see, Dark Harvest. Each time a unit with this obsession finishes a charge move, you can select an enemy unit and roll 1d6 on a 4-up. That unit suffers a mortal wound. It's okay. There's just so many better options that, I just don't think this is worth it. Dark Technomancers was really, really dumb until they fixed it. And again, I say fixed it because I don't know that the intent was liquefiers should work with it. So they had to they definitely patched that, but I don't know if it was because they just didn't write that in and they wanted to, or if they were just like, oh, uh, again, we're not the best at writing rules. Each time a unit with this obsession is selected to shoot, basically you can supercharge your guns. Liquefier guns and twin liquefier guns can now never be enhanced. That was an errata. If you do so until the end of the phase, each time an attack is made, You add one to the wound roll and the damage characteristic, but its hit roll cannot be re-rolled. If any unmodified hit rolls of 1 are made, you suffer a mortal wound. If it's a vehicle or monster, you suffer D3 mortal wounds instead. So again, it's high risk, high reward, right? You can end up really doing a lot of damage to yourself on bad dice because you can't re-roll them. But at the same time, man, you could do a lot of scary damage with them. You probably want to look at, sorry, some, like if you're running Talos, like the Talos, you're probably not going to want to put the Haywires on. You'll probably want to put something else on them if you're going to use that. The +1 to wound isn't going to affect the poison because it's unmodified wound rolls of 4. And the same with the Haywire, so you're going to want something that allows that to interact a bit more. But ultimately, like I said, I don't think once they errated it to say no to liquefiers, that there's not really a lot of reason to run it. I guess the disintegrator cannons could be pretty good if you put those on your raiders because they're strength 5, neg 3, 2 damage if I remember correctly. So getting 3 damage and +1 to wound could be pretty solid. But outside of that, like you're having to run like ossifactors, which again, or your hex rifles. And actually, hex rifles could be pretty nasty because then you're going to 3 damage and they're strength 6 and they're +1 to wound. So that could be pretty nasty. Experimental creations is one of my favorites. You add one to the strength characteristics of models with this obsession. This pushes your racks to strength 4, I believe. Your grotesques go to strength 6. Your talos go to strength 8, if I remember correctly. Or maybe with the macro scalpel, they go to strength 8, because I don't remember if the macro scalpel adds 1 to strength. Let's look real quick. So they're strength 6, so they go to strength 7, and then the macro scalpel puts them at strength 8. Strength 8, neg 2, 2 damage. And again, to me, this is how I'm running them in the league right now. And my Talos are strength 8, neg 2, 2 damage. And then I've got the 6s explode, which we'll get to. Hungry for flesh, reroll charge rolls. So again, that's not bad. Anything that gives you a free reroll on anything is going to be just a solid choice. It might not be your auto take, but it will never be a bad one, especially when you have a melee-centric army. Rerolling charge rolls is important. I cannot stress how many times I've needed here we go with my orc boys, so that is not a bad one. Masters of Mutagens. Each time a model with this obsession makes a melee attack with a poison weapon, that target hit rolls of 6 auto wound. So if you're doing that, you're leaning super hard into your poison weapons. Again, I don't think it's bad. I just think there's better builds to like maximize your damage because again, it still won't interact with vehicle or Titanic. And so you're wasting half your army bonus to auto wound something on something you're automatically wounding on 4s anyway. So it's not the end of the world. Master Torturers is hilarious. When you use Torturer's Craft, you can reduce the command point cost by 1. So that means it costs 1 CP for Grotesques, and it's free for racks 10 or less. Again, I don't think it's a bad take. I just don't think it's worth half your army bonus, and there's just better things out there. Each time an enemy unit is destroyed by a melee attack made by a unit with this obsession, a model in that can regain D3 lost wounds. It can only be healed once per turn. If it's a rack unit, D3 destroyed models can come back. Blah, 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 blah. I love obsessive collectors. I think it's very good. Again, you're going to want to run like a more rack heavy army because if you can run just like multiple units of racks and just keep like respawning racks as you kill opponents, that is going to help you out in the long run. That is going to help keep you on the table. And it's one of those where if you just lean into that aspect of it, racks can be really hard to remove. Now, if you're just running like min squads, like 5-man squads, they're going to die super quick. But if you lean into the fact that they can be hard to shift, they will be hard to shift. And, when that Tau book first came out and it was just like not had any points adjustments and players were playing with basically 2,500 points worth of models, The one army I was able to put together that was like, all right, I'm not tabled in 2 turns, was all racks running this, and then I forget what my other one was. It might have been my hit rolls of 6 explode, but we'll get there. Each time a model with this obsession makes an attack, the target does not receive the benefits of light or heavy cover against the attacks. Again, that's not bad. Ignoring cover is always a solid option, especially with an army that has so much neg 1 or neg 2 AP and not a lot of neg 3 or neg 4 outside of like Dark Lances. Again, it's not bad. I just think there are better picks like Splinter Blades, which is going to be hit rolls of 6 explode in the fight phase. So right now, that's what I'm running. I've got Splinter Blades and I've got Master. Nope, nope. Which one is it? Experimental Creations and Splinter Blades. And I'm running 2 units of racks, and that's really just because they're cheap and I can leave them on objectives and do actions with them because I'm running a space raid. But I'm running a 5-man of grotesques, and they all have the cleavers, right? And that cleaver is giving me 5 attacks per boy. So in 5 of them, I get 25 attacks. They are core, and it is a space raid, so they'll get reroll hit rolls of 1 from my Archon. So I'm able to basically hit on 3s or 2s, depending. Rerolling 1s, 6s explode. At strength 6, neg 2, 2 damage. They massacre so much. They are just bonkers with that build. Like strength 6 doesn't sound like a big deal, but it actually is. Like it is a lot of damage output. And 2 command points, you can reroll their wounds. The 6's explode basically gives you a 16% buff on your hit rate. So what that means is that if I'm in turn 3 and my racks or my grotesques get into something, I'm hitting 100% of the time on average because it's 2s rerolling 1, 6s explode, and then I'm rerolling wounds. And I can't count the number of times I've swung 25 dice and been like, all right, I need 30 saves. Like, sorry, buddy. Um, Pick them up, you know. And again, like they didn't do a ton in the Space Wolf game that I played, but they did what I needed them to do, and that was just soak so much of the shooting phase and be a threat because once they were in the middle of the board and they were T6, like he had to do something about them. And that allowed my succubus to go in and just like clean up different things and, just kind of blow things up in that way. So I think that is my favorite interaction, right? Is the Splinter Blades and experimental creations. But again, you have to build into it. But there's not a bad way to build into it. Because, like, if we go to the Chronos, they go to strength 6. So strength 6, neg 1, 1 damage. Uh, but they have 4 attacks and their hit rolls of 6 explode. Like, they get pretty good. They're not amazing in melee, but they're not bad. But again, if we look at the Talos, now we're fighting at strength 8, neg 2, 2 damage, like I said. And we're looking at 6 attacks with the way I'm running them. So again, I've got a unit of 3, or maybe it's a unit of 2. I'll have to look. But even with 2 of them, it's 12 attacks, and they hit on 3s or 2s depending on what turn. And it's just like they just do so much work, and they are again very tanky. So cool, 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 Drukari. Excuse me. So again, like if you're running mono Coven, I think some are better than others. I think the Butchers of Flesh is solid. Improving your AP by 1 isn't bad because again, like that does give some bite to the Talos, like or not the Talos, the Chronos, because again, their Spirit Leech tentacles become neg 2, and they actually become a little bit of a threat to certain units, even though they are weapon skill 4. The Talos go into neg 3 on the Macro Scalpel, or even just if you took the chain flails go into neg 1, and then you just get 10 attacks with them, right? So the chain flails could get pretty crazy with that faction. Like there's ways to build into it, but I just personally feel like the customs are a much better option for the homunculus units. as opposed to the custom cabals aren't the best and the custom witch cults aren't the best. Uh, and this is where it's like, no, this because the homunculus units have their customs really let you build into them, whereas the other ones don't really give you a lot of like ways to kind of build and tinker. This does give you that option. So let's see. Is there anything else we needed to talk about? I just wanted to make sure we kind of dove into those. Again, there's not a lot when it comes to what you can bring. You know, they have 5 data sheets in all, and then obviously you can put the Raiders and the Venoms in them. But again, it's just your build is going to largely depend on what you take. I am running a Tantalus, right? And the Tantalus can take either your Witch Cult or your Homunculus Coven or your Cabal, right? This is actually really funny. Let's close this out. And let's pull up the old Tantalus real quick. This is the last thing we're going to talk about, I think. So it gets one of these. Boop, 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 boop. I put it in my Homunculus Coven. And it's funny because now it fights at strength 8, neg 2, 2 damage, and its hit rolls of 6 explode. So if I can get it in early, it's going to get, like, yeah, it's weapon skill 4, but I'm getting 4 hits on average, right? Maybe 5 if we're turn 3. And it's just funny. You know, I'm wounding Marines on 2s, and it was relevant. So again, like I played that Space Wolf guy, and I charged it into a unit of whatever they are. I don't know, info cursors or in traders, whatever they are. Some sort of troop he had on an objective. I shot him first to kind of clear him off a little bit, and the thing does have solid guns. It's like 12 shots, strength 8, neg 3, 2 damage. And I think I killed like 3 of them, and then I charged him and then killed the last 2 in melee. Wounding him on 2s was super relevant. Like, this thing is just stupid. Like, I love it so much. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's not, I wouldn't say it's good, but it's not bad. And certain matchups are going to make it a lot harder to use than others. But because it's not a dedicated transport, actually, when I played against a Space Wolf player, I didn't even put anything in it. I just put it in reserves and then put everything else on the table. And that was super relevant, super important. And I'm glad I did it that way. So, outside of that, I think this is where we're going to call it for the day. I appreciate everybody hanging out. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Again, if you like what's going on here, make sure you smash that subscribe button, share the videos. Let's grow the community. I've got the giveaway for the Umbral 6 model going on. There's a link in that description, so make sure you're sharing that also. Again, what a great community we have. I appreciate each and every one of you. Everybody is real good about just being respectful and courteous when we interact, and it's awesome. I love seeing that type of interaction in our community. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.